Now let's put together everything that we've learned so far and build our first interactive form. Now, forms are how your users are going to be communicating with your app or with your game, whether that is them typing their names, selecting options, saving preferences, so on and so forth. Now, as we build those forms, I do want you to pay attention to the accessibility features and properties that we're going to be adding in here. These are not just nice to haves. They make your application usable for everyone, including people with assistive technologies, screen readers, keyboard-only navigations, and so on. Now, we're going to go ahead and build our forms. Over here, I will do form. We'll go ahead and give our form an ID, and let's call this player form. Within the form, this is where we're going to be adding our labels, our inputs, so on and so forth. But for organizational sake, I do like to wrap my things into divs. So each input basically will be wrapped in a div. So over here, I will have a label. And let's call this label player name. And for that, we'll go ahead and create an input. Let's do it like this. I'll do this over multiple lines just so it's easier to see all the properties that we're adding. So inside the input, it's going to be of type text. So that's the type of input. It'll have an ID as well. We'll give it a placeholder text. Let's call this enter your name. And we're going to add some validation properties here. So this is going to be a required field, and we'll go ahead and save that. Now, your form may not look exactly like that. That is because I already have made some CSS styling that basically will style my form so it looks a little bit nicer. Now, let me go back here, and right before the form, let's just add an H1. Let's call this player form. Now, we're not done here. This label and this input are not connected to each other by any means. We still need to include a property here called for, and that's, let's call this for the username. And on the input, we do need to include a name property with the same value. Now, these two are now connected to one another. These are what makes screen readers able to know that this input here has the label of player name. Not only that, it also makes the field itself or the label itself clickable. So now when I click on the label itself, it activates or puts the focus inside the input over here. Now let's go ahead and create another form input here. So I'll create another div. Inside of that, we'll go ahead and create our label, and let's call this difficulty. Now, as we're building it, we'll go ahead and give it the for property. So this is going to be for difficulty. We'll make it lowercase for consistency. And here, my input is not going to be a regular text input, but rather a select dropdown with multiple options that we can select from. So we'll go ahead and give it the ID of difficulty. We'll also give it the name of difficulty. The options that we have are going to be easy, medium, and hard. And now we also need to actually capture that in the properties of the option itself. So here, this will have the value of, and let's make them all lowercase. All right. The reason why we had to distinguish between what is the value and what is the input is because technically in the option, you could include a lot more information other than just the name of the option itself. Like, for example, I could add text here that says this is easy. And we could do the same for the medium, and we can add images and we can add icons and all of that kind of thing. So let's just put some emojis here for demonstration's sake. So now if I save that, you see how technically the options can be something, but if I do select any one of those, behind the scene, it will only capture the value of the property itself. Now, same thing, because we did connect the label with the select. If I click on the field here, or the label itself, it will also put the focus inside the select input. Now, finally, the last thing that our form will need is actually a button with the type of submit. And that button will have a text of save preferences. If I hit save, here we go. Again, keep in mind, I do already have my own styles here that basically makes my form look like that. Now, one more tip that I usually like to do when I'm coding, or when I'm still in the development mode, I'm still building my application, I know that I'm going to be typing in the player name, and I don't want to keep typing in that name over and over again. So one thing I like to do is that I go into the input field, and I would also hard code a value. So let's say I'm just going to put my name in here. Now, as I'm using my form, as I'm building the functionality, I don't have to keep typing in that name over and over again. That just comes with a built-in value. Just remember that at the end of your work, you will need to take that out, because it will just be so confusing when you ship your application to your users and they have some, name already hard-coded in there. Also, this required field here is basically what's going to make your browser detect if this field was empty. If you try to submit your form, it will actually have a error message that it will present to the user, and you can always override that with your own component or your own styles and so on. But for now, we're just going to be using the built-in validation that the browser will have for us. Also, the placeholder here is basically something that, let me go ahead and remove the value real quick. This is so the sighted users can actually see a little bit of a hint about what they need to do in this form. This does not replace the label. They are still needed. You still need the label because that's what screen readers are going to be looking for. I'll go ahead and put back my value, hard-coded value here. Now keep in mind that all of those accessibility features or accessibility add-ons that we're adding to our form are not just nice to haves. Yes, your form can function without them, but your application is not truly usable by users unless you remove those barriers and make sure that your application can work with screen readers and assistive technologies and so on. Now, let's go ahead and try to connect that with our JavaScript code. So I'll switch over to the JavaScript file. And first thing I'm going to need to do is capture my form itself. This is going to be document.getElementById, and let's look at the form. Our ID for the form was player form. So I'll copy that, and the ID we're looking for over here is this. Now, just a reminder, we could do the same thing by doing the query selector. And in that case, we have to remember to put on the pound sign. All right, so I'll keep both here. Now let's also try to capture the different fields that we have. So here, now if we now think about what is it that we want to do, we want to capture the submit event of our form. And when that happens, we do want to capture the value out of both of these inputs here. So over here, I'll create form.add event listener. The event we're listening for here is the submit event. And the action that we want to do is the following: capture the player. Actually, for clarity, let's call these player name input and difficulty input. That way here we can be explicit and call this player name equal player name input dot value. And we'll do the same for our difficulty, where it would equal the difficulty input dot value. Let's just add a few console logs here. Console log, what is the player name, and console log, what is the difficulty. And let's just see if that works. Now, if I come over here and I hit the save preferences button, you see how there's a little bit of a glitch. It's not really glitching. You can see the name appears. I'm gonna slow this down just so you can see it real quick. But when I hit the save preferences, you see that the name appears for like a millisecond and then it goes away. What is happening here is caused by the default behavior of what forms were built to do. Now, keep in mind, HTML predates JavaScript by many years. And so the default behavior of forms was that whenever you hit the submit button, you are capturing all the data inside of that form. you're sending it to a server that then would respond back with a complete updated HTML page that includes whatever it is that you were looking for. So in our case, because that's no longer the behavior we want, we actually want to handle everything on the JavaScript side. I'm gonna need to capture the event. I can either call it event or just E for short. And the first thing I need to do in any form submit is to instruct my form to prevent the default behavior. Again, the default here was that it would capture all this data, will send it to a server, and then it will reload the page with whatever results it gets back from that server. So now if I save this, and I'm just gonna remove everything that was added to my query here. These were again caused by the previous submit behavior. So if I remove all of that and open my form again, now if I do hit the save preferences button, we're handling everything on the JavaScript side. So I was able to capture the name of the user as well as the difficulty. If I switch that over to medium, and even though you see like that the option has a lot more text than what we set in the option value, that's not what we get back. That's not what we save in the form itself. So even if I do select medium here and hit save preferences, we are getting back just the value that we set in the HTML option value right here. Now I do want to show you one more thing that we could also do on the JavaScript side. Now notice how for every input we had to capture the name or capture a reference to that DOM element on the page, and we then had to extract the value out of that. We could actually do without all of this by just capturing all the values from the form data itself. So rather than capturing or finding the reference to the elements, we can just use the form to capture all the values that live within that form. I'll go ahead and show you what that would look like real quick. I'll go ahead and for now just comment these two out. And in that case, this is not gonna work. But what we will do is I'll create a form data object equal new form data. You basically see that the tooltip is asking you to provide what is the HTML form element. We could either do form since we're already capturing it over here and we're already using it here, but we could also use the event target, which is again referencing the form element. So I could do e.target, or for clarity, we'll just do form. Now the next thing, I need to actually capture the data from this form data object, and that will be object.from entries. We'll call our form data object.entries. And now if I console log this data, let's get rid of the final two console logs because they are no longer relevant because we don't have those variables anymore. If I hit save and we come back over here, as I hit save preferences, I get back an object here that has all of the values that we've added to our form. So I do not need to reference any individual element by name. Now we can also talk about something called unpacking, which is how you would capture those into individual variables. So rather than capturing all of that in a single variable called data, I could actually do a curly bracket, and I will capture the names of my properties or the keys of this object. So in that case, that is difficulty and username. So if I do username and difficulty, now I no longer have this data variable, but I do have a variable called username, and I do have another variable called difficulty. And let's do some string interpolation here. So I'll do the backtick, and here we'll do username is $, curly bracket, and that's how you would inject a variable into your string. So here's username, and let's do the same for our difficulty. The difficulty is, here we go. Now if I save, and if I come back and save preferences, we get back these two console logs. Now I'm ready to go back and remove my hard-coded value from my HTML file. Hit save. Now I start with the placeholder. I can type in any name I want and change the difficulty setting and save preferences. And now we're able to see that in the console over here. This is the foundation of our forms. And in the next video, we'll start talking about validations and how we can validate our input from the user.